Morning. Okay, let me begin by reviewing some of the themes of Job. We're on our fifth week by now. I think we have one more sermon after this on Job. The main theme of Job so far is suffering and the questions that suffering brings. How can a good and powerful God allow innocent good people to suffer? And these questions haunt us, and it haunts Job. Job the man stands in for all of us. We all suffer, and when we do, we ask the same questions that Job is asking. Why is this happening to me? Does this pain have any purpose? What does this mean? What is God doing? And so the search for meaning in our pain seems to be hardwired into human nature. It's just universal. And so what if the answer was, well, nothing? It just means nothing. Things just happen. Random events happen for no reason. I mean, imagine someone you love got cancer. Maybe that's not even hypothetical. Or imagine someone you love dies of a tragic accident. And what if it means nothing? It's just random. And what if nothing good comes out of it? What if that was the answer? If that was the case, I don't think our human nature or psychology could tolerate it, because pain demands meaning. It demands some kind of explanation. And I'm reminded of a modern and a very not Christian meditation on the nature of suffering. The 20th century existentialist writer Franz Kafka wrote a book called The Trial. This is actually one of my favorite books. I find it haunting, and it sticks with me. In this book, the main character, just a regular guy named Joseph K., is dragged before court one day, and he's accused of a crime. And throughout the entire story, Joseph K. is trying to find out what crime he's accused of committing, because he has no clue what he did. And he's quite sure he's innocent, but they keep accusing him of a crime. And he says, I don't know what I did. They won't even tell him what crime he's guilty of, so he can't even defend himself from the crime that he might or might not have committed. And throughout the entire book, he never finds out. In a long, drawn-out process, he appeals through a very complicated and Byzantine bureaucratic legal system. And throughout the entire book, he's just constantly confused and frustrated. He has no clue what crime he's accused of committing. And in the end of the book, on the last couple of pages, the day before his 31st birthday, two men show up one day outside his apartment. They stab him to death with a butcher knife. And that's it. He dies, left bleeding in the streets. And that's the end of the book. And then he never finds out what crime he's accused of committing. We never know what crime he's accused of committing. And I suppose it doesn't really matter by the end of the book because, well, he's dead. His life, his struggles, his suffering and his death, they are all completely forgotten and they're meaningless, and no one remembers who he is or what he did or what he didn't do. I mean, I think this book is horrifying. Nothing dramatic happens. There's no scary monster, no CGI demons. It's really, really boring, actually. It's horrible because it is so boring, because his life is meaningless and boring and his suffering means nothing. Now, according to Kafka, who was an atheist existentialist, and this is very typical of atheist existentialists, the world is random. Things happen for no reason. There's no explanation for suffering. The horror that Kafka describes in his book is a dread that Job is fighting against. I mean, Job is clearly suffering, and he is demanding meaning and explanation. Now, I want you to notice that throughout the book, Job is not necessarily demanding a restoration of what he lost. I mean, he's just accepted at this point. His life's just awful. Now what he wants is meaning and an explanation. And that's what we all instinctively want when we suffer. When we're in the middle of suffering, we want to know, is it worth it? Or will good come from this? Is something redemptive out of this? Can I pull something good out of this suffering? Now, Kafka is the anti-Job. Kafka's character searches for meaning and finds nothing. And Kafka's basic message as an existentialist writer is, don't even look for meaning. You'll never find anything. Any meaning you find is just stuff we've just made up as a fiction to comfort ourselves. Job searches for meaning and eventually finds God, or rather God finds Job at the end of the book. But that's next week's sermon. Kafka's existentialist world, in which suffering is random and meaningless, again, is intolerable to us psychologically. I mean, I think no one can really live that way. Maybe a few can, but the majority of us can't. Again, our souls and minds are hardwired to demand and yearn meaning in our suffering and in our lives in general. I mean, I'm convinced that if there were no God, and there is, and I think we would invent a God in response to our suffering. If Kafka's right, then suffering is meaningless and the world is truly random. I'm convinced we would just invent a religion just to give ourselves suffering some meaning. So I want to go to the passage at hand. This week's passage comes from Job chapters 29 through 31, which is a reading from this week. Now, those are 4 chapters, so I want to focus on just 3 verses from those chapters. Job chapter 31, verses 4 through 6, I'm going to read right now. And by the way, I'm actually going to take this translation from the NIV. It's not the one we typically use here, but I think this translation is just a little bit better for a variety of reasons for this purposes. Chapter 31, verses 4, I'll start here. Does God not see my ways and count my every step? If I have walked with falsehood, or my foot has hurried after deceit, let God weigh me in honest scales, and he will know that I am blameless. This is the word of the Lord. And again, I want to think about the nature of Job's claim, not just in this short passage, but the entire section of those chapters. Job is the cry of indignation for everyone who suffers. On one level, when we suffer, we just don't like hurting. That's just basic and plain. No animal likes to suffer. No human likes to suffer on a level of preference. We don't like it. But what Job is saying here is deeper and more systemic. Job is not just saying, I don't like this. I don't like what's happening to me. He's saying something grander. He's saying this is wrong. This is not the way it's supposed to be. What he's saying is the rules of the universe have been broken and violated. If God weighed me on honest scales, like some kind of transaction, like I'm buying something in the market, this wouldn't be right. If God weighed me on honest scales, I would come out blameless. And since I'm innocent, all this bad stuff should not happen to me. It's not that I just don't want to suffer. All right, no one wants to suffer, but I should not suffer. Again, the rules of the universe have been violated against me. Bad things are not supposed to happen to innocent people. That's the root of his claim. That's the entire book. I mean, let me translate what Job is saying into maybe a modern context. What he's saying is this: if I did terrible things and I got what I deserved, yeah, I would hate it, of course. But that's the way it's supposed to happen. Now, for example, like if I cheated on my wife, and then as a result, my wife left me and took the kids and half my money, I would hate that. No, but that's a natural result of what I did. I don't have to like it. I can't say that's wrong. That's actually right. Or let's just say I got really drunk one night and I crashed into a tree. I wrecked my car, injured my body, get thrown in jail. Yeah, of course I would hate that. I don't like that. I don't like the consequence of what I did. But I get what I deserve. Okay, those are the natural consequences of my actions. And Job is saying here, if I did evil things, yeah, that's what happens. I would accept my fate. Because that's the way it's supposed to work. That's a system. Those are the rules of the world. The way Job conceives of it, the rules of the world, that he's railing against God using this system of the world that he thinks he lives in. It's like the law of gravity. Like if I hold up a bowling ball and I drop it, it falls on my foot, I break my toe. Well, I can't complain. That's just the way it is. I don't like the pain in my foot, but that's gravity. That was supposed to happen. But Job is, again, he's angry and indignant because he's adamant that he is a good man, and that's the root of his claim. Now, from Job's perspective, in the world he's living in, it's like God just said, hey, I don't care. I'm just going to break the rules, or rather, there are no rules at all. It's random. God saying, I'm going to do whatever I want to you. Let me give you the broader context of this verse. Job has been arguing with his friends, and this is like a massive theological, epic, cosmic debate between two sides, arguing about the nature of the world. You got Team Job versus Team Job, Team Job versus Team Friends of Job. Again, Job's basic argument is this: I should not suffer. This is not right. The basic argument of Job's friends is this: you, Job, deserve to suffer. You did something clearly wrong. Well, we don't actually know what you did, but we know you did something wrong, so your suffering must be right. You know the irony that's often missed is that both sides of this cosmic debate, Team Job versus team friends of Job, they actually want the same thing. They're actually arguing for the same thing. Both sides want a world or system that is consistent and makes sense. They both want what you might call justice, reason, fairness. And I think even more importantly, they want something they can understand, comprehend, and control. And I think this is a key. They want a world that they can comprehend, understand, and control. And I think actually both sides kind of want to game the system, understand the system, and game it for your own benefit. I want to make a few more points here. Why are Job's friends so insistent that Job confess and acknowledge his sins, his crime? Again, Job must feel like Kafka's Joseph K. What did I do? What crime did I commit? Even though Job has no sins, he's blameless. The Bible says, though, in the opening verses, he said he is blameless. And if they really are his friends, and let's assume they really are his friends, they must know Job is a blameless man. If Job's claims are right, and he is right, then the friends have to acknowledge the system that we live under is broken. It doesn't work. Or worse, there is no system at all. And if that's the case, their whole system of meaning is in chaos. That's very unnerving. If Job is right, then Franz Kafka's right, and the world's random. And then your pain means nothing. And again, that's just horrifying and intolerable. Psychologically, no one can tolerate that. Pain and suffering, psychologically, whether it's true or not, we demand that it has meaning. We will extract meaning out of it. The world has to be consistent, has to be ordered. And they once thought they understood what it all meant. But Job's life, it's like a testimony. It's throwing a monkey wrench in the whole system they thought they understood. And so they demand, confess, say it, say you did something wrong. They need him to say something. Let me give you a dumb example that could explain what I mean by this system of meaning that Job and his friends were operating under. It's a very dumb example, but it's the best one I got. About 8 years ago, for some reason, or for a variety of reasons, I took this job. It was a part-time, temporary job for 7 days in the beginning of the summer. There's this company called the ETS. You're Korean, most of you are. You know what this is. That's a company that administers the SATs, APs, GREs, LSATs, MCATs, the bane of our young Korean existence at one point in our lives. And so there's this exam called AP US History. And part of the AP US exam, there's a lot of bubbles, multiple choice, but there's one part where you write an essay, and they actually need human beings to read these handwritten essays. And so I applied for a job to read these handwritten essays. And so for 7 days in a row, for 8 hours a day, I read one essay question over and over and over again. Now, I did this online, so I did it in the basement of my house. You could imagine this got really boring really, really fast. It was horrible. I want to be clear. I have no love for the ETS. I have no love for AP US exams. I have no love at all for the whole exam regime. I hate them. I didn't like taking standardized testing. I don't like the fact that we have to take them at all. But here it is. But I agreed to do this for 7 days. It was really, really boring. And so after the first few hours, I got so bored. I was dying. But to motivate me, I want to be clear, by the way, since I don't love the ETS or the AP exams, why did I do it? Well, I'll be quite honest. I did it for the money. I wanted some money. It was very clear. Signed a contract. If you grade for this many hours in 7 days, you will get this much money. So, all right, I'll do it. I'll do my job with integrity. I'll do it well. And so after the first few hours, I just got so bored. I just wrote down how much money I'd make by the end of all this just to keep myself motivated. But that wasn't enough, so I divided that by 7. I wrote, okay, this is how much money you'll make per day. By the end of the day, you'll make this much money. I was like, all right, I'll do that. And that wasn't very good, so I broke it down to hour. I thought, you're making this much money per hour. I said, all right, so then I got so bored, I broke it down by minute. You're making this much money every 60 seconds. Then I decided, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to make this much money for every essay I read. And so I got through it. I actually got through it. I did my 8 days of grading. I'm like, yes, I did it. All right, I can stop. And then 10 minutes later, I got an email from the ETS saying, hey, listen, we got thousands of exams left to read. And you're one of our highest rated graders. Your accuracy is really high. You're very efficient. We like the work you're doing. Do you want to do more? And the rate's this. We'll pay you this much per hour for bonus for every hour you work. And I said yes. So I don't know what's wrong with me. I must really love money. So I did it for another day and a half. And then I told them, yeah, I'm done. I mean, I could have done it for another 5 days, but I said, no, I'm done. Because I think I just made a mental calculation. This much work for this much money. All right, some bonus. This much more work for this much money. I thought, all right, I'm done. My motive was money, to be quite honest. I wasn't greedy. I didn't cheat the system. It was very clear. This. It's a dumb little story, but I want to make a point. Did I suffer? Yeah, sort of. It was really boring, exhausting, but again, the system made perfect sense. I did a very specific thing, and I got a very predictable thing out of it. A few weeks later, they sent me a check, and it was right down to the penny. That's exactly what I thought they paid me, and that's what they paid me. It was fair. It was mechanical. It was automatic. Because I was grading it online, I never met a person. I had no clue who my administrator was. I had no clue who was sending me emails periodically to tell me how I was doing or what was coming up down the pipeline. I had no clue who these students were who wrote these essays. It was me alone in the basement, doing work, getting paid. Very mechanical, very predictable. There was no care about it. I think Job and his friends think this is how the world works. This is what makes the world work, and this makes suffering make sense. If you do good things, you'll have a prosperous life. If you do evil things, you'll be punished. Second observation, Job is righteous and Job is blameless. And friends would have known that. So if Job is suffering, he was blameless, then what's going to happen to the friends? If this is what Job gets for being blameless, what sort of suffering are they in for or not in for? Job is a threat to them, and his very life makes them feel unsafe and out of control. So like a Greek play, the friends are like a chorus, and they keep arguing with Job vigorously. Confess, confess, confess. Just say it. Just say you deserve this. Say it's all your fault. Notice they never actually accuse him of any specific crime. Again, like Kafka's at trial. They have no evidence. But they need him to be guilty for this system to be preserved. Again, Job's very existence is a threat to their system, their safety, their security, their sense of control. Job's life has turned their world and their security upside down. The system that they believe in means they have control of their lives. And again, if they're reasonably good, they can avoid a catastrophe. But Job's a threat to their perceived sense of control. I confess, I think we all do this, but I'll just say how I do this. I'm not proud of it. But over the years, I've known some people whose marriages fell apart. No one here, no one you would ever know. And of course, when I hear about my friends whose marriages are crumbling or about to crumble, I'm upset. It's deeply troubling. But quietly, to myself, I automatically start wondering, the way my brain starts going, as soon as I hear about this, I start wondering if I can retroactively see the cracks in their relationship from the years ago. Now, I'm not a gossip. Again, I keep these questions myself, and I'm not gloating. My heart mourns for these broken marriages. But I'm pretty sure I think these thoughts because I want some explanation that if I can see the evidence or the reason why their marriage fell apart, and I see that my marriage is not like that, I think I can reassure myself that my marriage is safe. Okay? Because if they did this, and I'm not doing this, then I'm okay. I'm not proud of this. It's just when my brain wanders. And I'm almost like Job's friend saying, well, maybe they deserved it. Maybe it was always baked in the cake, and that ingredient's not my cake, so I'm safe. Explanations are comforting because randomness is unsettling. Again, explanations and systems make us feel safe and in control. Let me give you another example. A few years ago, someone I knew from college, a peer, she died of lung cancer. I haven't really been in touch with her for many, many years. I just heard it through the network of friends I have. And the first thought that crossed my mind was, she's died of lung cancer. She doesn't smoke. How'd she get lung cancer? Then a mutual friend of mine, who's a doctor, said, well, the kind of cancer, lung cancer she got is not the kind you get from smoking. It's just, random. You just get this kind of cancer. I thought, well, she's young. He said, yeah, well, that's the way this cancer works. It's not about smoking or being around, a coal factory. It just happens, no warning, no explanation, no cause, and that's very, very unsettling. And that sounds really, really dumb, but the first thought of my head when I heard about this, where my brain went was, well, she's a Christian. She's a wife of a pastor. She's got 2 kids. She doesn't smoke. She can't get lung cancer. Now, what I just said is really dumb, but that's where my mind went. Because on some gut level, I think I'm like Job and his friends. I keep thinking that if you live a good life, bad things don't happen. I know it's wrong. I'm more theologically sophisticated than that. That's just where my brain goes. Again, I think we're kind of like Job and his friends, all of us. And I'm thinking, well, if she could get it, well, then I could get it. I don't like that. I think Job and his friends and me, and I think all of us, we yearn for control and safety and understanding. We want to comprehend this world. We want a universe and system that we can predict and understand so we can navigate our way through it. And we find refuge and comfort in explanations that give us an illusion that we are in control. We'll even believe in false, wrong systems that give us a false sense of safety rather than wanting to be thrust into the world that makes no sense. This idea that Job and his friends believed in, this system in which a moral life leads to good fortune, that sinful life leads to suffering, again, that's very mechanical, precise, and predictable. It's like a vending machine. There is one near my office. Every now and then, I put in $2, I press A65, and I get a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos. I always get Cool Ranch Doritos, that's all I ever get. It's always $2, it's always A65. I actually remember the numbers. So I follow certain rules, and I get what I want. Or maybe we imagine God's like a vending machine. If you do certain things, God won't wreck your life, because those are the rules. This is something I find really interesting. Around the same time that the story of Job might have been conceived and written down, we don't really know. It's a really, really old book. Around the same time, in ancient Greece, there was a Greek philosopher named Heraclitus. And he starts writing and talking about this idea called the logos. Now, we translate the word logos into word, but it means much more than word. It means the operating and ordering principles of the world, the unchanging rules that hold this world together. I think he was anticipating what we might call scientific laws of the universe. Again, I think it's very analogous to Newton's law of gravity or Newton's laws of motion, or a vending machine, or the ETS. There's a system of doing things that just makes sense. It's controlled. You get it. You understand it. It's predictable. It's reliable. The ETS, the logos, the vending machine, gravity, it's not personal. Now, Heraclitus and the Stoic philosophers would say, figure out the rules of the world, live by those rules, and you will have a good life. It's very predictable. It's guaranteed. And Job and his friends are believing like Stoics. They want the logos. They want a world that makes sense. And this is something I find really interesting. The Stoics philosophers were reacting against the pagan gods of their day, Zeus, Hera, Aphrodite, Apollo, so on and so forth. You've heard of those guys back in high school, living up on Mount Olympus. What were these gods like? They were like the Real Housewives of Athens. They were crazy. They were capricious, they were erratic, unprincipled, unreliable, passionate, completely unpredictable. They were driven by jealousy and fragile egos. Their behavior was purely subjective, and we all suffer the consequences of their temper tantrums, their changing passions from day to day. Now, if you read ancient Greek mythology, or pretty much all ancient mythology at this time period, you see that the ancient gods might strike you down or bless you just because they liked you or they hated you, or they might like you one day and hate you the next day. The logos is the total opposite of the pagan gods. It is completely reliable, completely predictable, but utterly impersonal. Again, the problem with the logos is that it's not personal. The logos doesn't care about you. It can't, by the very nature of the fact that it's a logos. It's principled and unyielding. Again, the logos is like gravity. I mean, I want you to imagine, hypothetically, you just fell out of a tall building and you're falling out of a window. And you're falling, and gravity is pulling you down. Can you imagine you scream and beg gravity, "Oh, gravity, have pity on me"? No, you don't. Don't you love me, gravity? You never do this, because gravity, like the logos, just doesn't care. It's utterly impersonal. This is the difference between the logos and the pagan gods. Again, imagine you're on a beach and a tidal wave is coming to wipe you out and you're going to die. And the pagan Greek would say, "Oh, Poseidon, Lord Poseidon, please have mercy on me. If you spare my life and hold back the tidal wave, I'll kill 100 bulls in your name." Maybe Poseidon says, "All right, 100 bulls, I'll take it." Go back. The Stoic, the believer in the logos, would say, "Well, I'm going to die. It's just how it is. There's no use crying about it. I think in the future, we really ought to study physics and meteorology and oceanography and figure out how to avoid these things in the future." You do not appeal to the logos. It just is. Ask yourself this question. I've been asking myself this question this week. Are you basically a Stoic? Do you functionally treat God like a set of noble rules? Are we a little bit like Job and his friends? Meaning this, are we trying to be Christian, be good, as a form of life insurance, protection from the horrors of life? If we just go to church and be Christian and do Christian things, we will be protected, and God will spare us, because that's how it ought to work. I mean, there's something really appealing about this approach, isn't there? I mean, if that were the case, we would understand the rules in the system, and there's no mystery. And also, like the ETS and grading APA US exams, you could calculate and calibrate exactly what you want and how much you're willing to give. Do you ever do a spiritual life cost-benefit analysis? I mean, not on a conscious level. No one's that dumb, but on a subterranean, unconscious level, are you calibrating? I mean, you know yourselves. I mean, look, I could be this Christian, or I could be barely Christian. I could be like the Apostle Paul, or I could be the guy that goes to church barely, just Christian enough not to go to hell, but not much more. You know, we think to ourselves, I mean, you could do this, you know. We don't want to. I don't want to, all right? So maybe you're thinking, and again, you're not this theologically naive. I know, but maybe do you think, how much do I want to give to God? And maybe you're calculating on a cost-benefit analysis, like me with the ETS. I can do some bonus questions. Well, how much do I want from God, all right? So maybe you're thinking, well, you know, I could do more, but I don't want to do more to get much more. I want this, so I'm going to just ratchet up my Christian life to get exactly what I want. That's good enough for me. You just wonder, how many spiritual merit badges will I get from doing all this? How much insurance do I need? You could buy, I mean, even in your own life, you could buy this much life insurance, but that'll cost you a lot of money. You don't want no insurance, that's kind of irresponsible. So we all do a little calibration. How much life insurance do I want? Have we turned God into the ETS, a little bonus side hustle, into life insurance? How Christian do you really want to be? I know this sounds crass, but that sort of universe is really appealing. You know, there's control in this, there's safety. And if things don't work out, then, you know, you can go talk to the manager or customer service. And then things get cleared up. And that's the world Job and his friends are living in, rules and results. Let me think about this now for a minute. Sigmund Freud, I like Freud. He's wrong about many, many things, right about a few things, and kind of weirdly sort of right about a couple things. Freud was no Christian. He's an atheist. He created Christianity. But this is one thing about Freud. Well, I say many things about Freud, fascinating, but this is one thing I find fascinating. Freud argued that Christians don't go to church to be good. Christians don't go to church to be closer to God. Christians actually go to church in order to be bad. And Christians actually go to church to get away from God. I'm not saying he's right, But I think functionally, he's kind of right. That's not the way we should be, but that's kind of the way it works out. Meaning this, it's kind of like paying God off. It's like paying off the mob. Like if I go to church and confess my sins and do some outwardly good things, I'm kind of paying God something to give me permission to be bad the rest of the week. Or if I just give God some sacrifices, I tithe, I go through the motions, I worship. I've allowed God to say, okay, you're good enough, you pass, meaning for the rest of my life is mine. Does that make sense? I'm not saying he's right. But I think functionally, I just wonder if we kind of partake in some of that we are Christians not to be close to God, but to get away from God, to buy ourselves some space for independence. Again, what do we get out of turning God into a system? I will give you things, and you in exchange will give me a good life. And God, you're not allowed to mess with a system. That's the way it's supposed to work. Job is learning something. I understand why instinctively Job went to the whole world of the system. But Job is learning something deep, profound. And we have to learn something deep and profound by digging into the world of Job, by digging into this world and this mind of what God is teaching Job something. He's not cruel to Job. He's showing him something. And God is showing us something, that we've misunderstood God. Instinctively, we've misunderstood God. Let me point something else out. And I think what Job is doing, it's wrong, but it makes sense. His friends are wrong, but it makes sense. I mentioned before, Job was written at a time that the Logos at the same time was being written. I find this fascinating, by the way. At the same time that Job and Logos were being cooked up, in India, there's this book called the Upanishads, one of the earliest Hindu texts, and that's the first time the word karma is being developed. Job, Logos, and karma, they have some stuff in common. Again, the idea of karma is you get what you deserve. You give out good, you get good. Give out bad, you get bad. They have nothing, these guys were not in any contact. They're coming up with some similar ideas. At the same time that Job is written, that Heraclitus is writing, the Upanishads are being written, out in China, Confucius is writing. Confucius is basically saying, there's a system to the world. This is what the world does. This is how the world makes sense. Right? Across the globe, people are coming up with this rational way of looking at the world. And I think that what they all have in common is we can control the world, control our lives, if you just understand it, figure it out, and more crassly, if you can like game the system. Let me jump to the end of the book. Job wants answers. Job wants the Logos. Job wants to understand why he followed all the rules and it just didn't work out. Job wants to talk to the manager. Well, the manager doesn't show up. God shows up and finally appears to Job. Again, God is no manager. He does not logically explain suffering to Job or some technique to avoid suffering. God instead says the answer is not this philosophy. It's me. I'm going to give you myself. God gives us not a set of rules or a flow chart, but a personal God. You can understand a set of rules for living a good life, but you can never understand God, not fully. God is far beyond Job's comparatively little mind. And this does not mean that God's erratic or illogical like the old pagan gods. You know, if you were in this system, if you're a Stoic, if you're Heraclitus, you're actually caught between two impossible places. On the one hand, you have the crazy gods. They're completely unreliable, but it's subjective and personal. On the other hand, you have the Logos, which is completely predictable, totally logical, comprehensible, but doesn't give a rip about you, doesn't care at all. These are impossible choices. It reminds me, one of my favorite parts of the Bible is when the Jews were caught between the Red Sea and the Pharaoh's chariots, right? On this side, we're going to drown and die. On that side, we're going to get slaughtered by the chariots. All right, choice A, death. Choice B, death. God offers the impossible third choice, one you would have never thought about in a million years. I will part the Red Sea. You will pass through, and you'll be sprinkled with water and be baptized and come out the other end of the Red Sea as a transformed being. God is a God of the third choice that you would have never thought about. Okay? We are caught between crazy gods and uncaring logos. Right? And God is always the God of the impossible, the salvation that comes from nowhere that you would have never seen when you're trapped and there's nowhere to go. God is not erratic and illogical and crazy like the old pagan gods. But he's something like the Logos, but completely different. The Gospel of John draws upon the Stoic Greek philosopher and uses his words. John says Jesus is the Logos. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. What does that mean? The Logos of the Stoics, but with the face. Logic, but with will, love, and wisdom, and personality. It's like the law of gravity, but the gravity actually knows your name and loves you and cares for you and wants the best for you. How could that make any sense? Logic, law, or logos says that we have to die. We're sinful. The rules are clear. Like gravity, there's no way out. If it were just the logos, there's no pleading or begging. Again, you fall out of a window, you're falling. You can't beg gravity to have mercy on you, because the logos or the law of gravity is impersonal. But Jesus is a logos that became a person. So God doesn't break the law, because that would make him crazy like Zeus. But he turns himself into the law, and he turns the law onto himself, the cross. Only the logos, who is a person, can say, the law says you die. The logos says you're guilty. But Jesus says, I am the logos. And I take the punishment on myself. I will invert it. God is the God of the third option, the salvation that you never saw coming, that you never imagined, never conceive of. This is way beyond any logical system that Job or his friends or even we could ever conceive of. Like Job, I think we are inclined to reduce God into a vending machine. First of all, that's just wrong. But it's worse than wrong. It's horrifically tragic. $2, $8.65, Cool Ranch Doritos. That's very safe and very predictable. But that's all you'll ever get. If you want to turn God into a vending machine, all you'll get from him are Cool Ranch Doritos. You give and you get. That's all you'll ever have. And you think you want this good life. And you think if you do this, God, you'll have a bargain with God, and he'll give you this. The problem is our imagination is so tiny and minuscule. You want Doritos. God wants to give you a feast. And our eyes are too dim to see what God really wants. So we don't give him enough. And we'll never give him enough anyway. We just want to pour a blessing upon you. And we reduce God to something that he is not, and that is tragic. But what God gives us so much more than we could ever hope, expect, or imagine. Let's pray. Lord,